We'll wait for a little while. It's not even start time yet. How is everyone?
Great. How are you, Bob?
I'm very well, thank you. Um, um, After the presentation that I just gave, I'll wait until people come into the room. Which part am I gonna do this? Someone's a little choppy there. Mika Aviles. Okay, do you want to test your sounds? So sentient code, do you want to go fast first?
Sorry, say that again.
I just wanted to check your sound.
Oh, you sound like you might be a bit quiet.
I need to be a bit quiet because I've got my family in the other room.
Copy that.
It's deliberate. Okay, so it is 2300, so we're going to get going here. So essentially, I had to share something. I think it was in early 2016 that I started talking about ball lightning being important in this process. Maybe it was late in 2016. Certainly, I did the interviews with George Eagley in October of 2016 called Stardust. And in a presentation I gave at the beginning of 2017, I think it was to the Stanford Energy Club, I talked about ball lightning being a critical part of the process. Well, that year happened to be the year of birth and baptism for me in all things exotic vacuum objects, ball lightning, and so forth. And interestingly, a couple of people visited me here in Brno. One of them just said, "Oh, I'm passing through. Can I meet up?" I said, "All right, yeah, fine." Turns out that this guy was, by his own claims, a relative of Buckminster Fullerene. We sat down for dinner, and that was that. I think he was a grandson or something. I can't recall completely. I've looked through my emails. I can't find the interaction where he was trying to arrange the meeting. At least I didn't try very hard. But it definitely happened. And later that year, one guy called Russ George, who you might know from the sort of putting iron oxide into the seas to increase fish. That was his sort of undertaking. Anyway, I'm just going to check the levels here, just in case I can raise my voice. Da, 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 da. Input. Okay, is that louder? That might be better. Okay. Yeah, so Russ George came to visit me, and that was interesting. And there's a thing on muons, which I published on the MFMP SoundCloud at the time. And I didn't think too much of this. So I gave my presentations on Matsumoto. I gave my presentations that you've just seen, if you were watching it, on my own ideas that have developed with regarding to Lena in the poster session at ICCF 26. And then with my work out of the way, I took a rest. And then the following day, I started going through the extra 60 kilos or whatever it was that had been sent by Haruka-san, Matsumoto's daughter, to the hotel. And I found something that utterly shocked me, but didn't surprise me. And I'm basically holding it here in my hand. And it made me angry, actually. Um, so, where is it? It's not that one. It's this one here. And it is called the new, is it that one? No, it's not that one either. It's this one. Okay. It's called, here we can see it, Power from Small Suns. This is the original document, and I'm going to try and pull up a version of that for you to look at here. So let me see if I can do that. Okay, so is it this one? No, it's not. Is it that one? Yes, it is. Okay, so let's see if I can show this. Yeah, this might make you angry as well. So, just to give the context, of course, in my Matsumoto presentation, I actually showed we had several of the documents laid out from some of the Matsumoto archive original documents. And one of them was the original set of documents from Ed Lewis that was sent in 1993 to Matsumoto, signed by Ed Lewis with a cover note with an annotated version of Ken Shoulder's 1992 patent with some workings of Randall Mills and something else. Anyway, so Matsumoto realized that probably what was going on in the system was related to ball lightning. So he met with George Eagley at a conference, I think it was in Japan. George Eagley has told me the other half of that story when I was with him in India. And he said that he met him for a brief time and he wished he'd spent more time, since then engaging with him, but he didn't. Anyway, Matsumoto had done his own homework and had looked into all of the books that George Eagley had published on ball lightning. And so there were some of those materials there. Of course, then Matsumoto started referring to this as microball lightning generated. And by 1994, fusion technology had changed the rules such that you couldn't publish in fusion technology unless you had found neutrons, gamma, alpha particles, or X-rays. It's interesting because the relationship with fusion technology, I thought had finished at that point, but I'm already finding actual signed letters from George Miley and asking, for instance, Matsumoto to be a peer review for an article that's been submitted to the journal, and also articles that were submitted to the journal, including article where he was making this complaint about what was going on with the changes in the rules. And so, in this context, obviously, someone had found out that Matsumoto had found all these observations in his work, and they were quite excited about that. And so what happened was letters were sent in mid to late 1995 from a group that changed its name briefly over this period or in a short period of time. And we're going to look at one of the first letters that was sent to Matsumoto. And I'm just going to read it out when I can share it, which I'm going to do now. So before I do this, can you just kind of do a thumbs up and confirm that you can hear what I'm saying? Don't want to be talking to myself. Yeah, okay, so I've got a thumbs up at least from one of you. That's great. And Joseph Collar saying he's got no working mic. Okay, all right. All right, let me see if I can share this. Okay, I am going to do this. Share. Now it goes all funny. Okay. Power from small suns. Maybe can everyone see that clearly? It would be great if you could give me an indication as to whether you can see that clearly. Yes, okay, great. Cold fusion is alive and kicking. There is no controversy anymore. It works and is 100% repeatable. Early experimenters just didn't know the proper formula. However, the temperatures of cold fusion are too low to produce any meaningful power devices. American Cold Fusion Engineering and Supply has stumbled on an exciting discovery that may produce fusion in a non-metallic material. Now, immediately when I read that, I thought, wow, I think this must be carbon. I mentioned the use of carbon in a suggested hypothesis in 2013 in January. Ultimately, that became part of the Lion experiments with the late Neil Crichton Gold. I also deduced after 2015 visiting Piantelli that niche energy was capital Ni, capital C, capital H, and then capital E energy. And I suggested that actually that meant that there was carbon used in the reactors. And latterly, we found that it would appear, admitted very recently, that from at least 2001 in the plasma vortex reactors of Anatoly Klimov, they have been using carbon, specifically CC bond, which, as per my paper that I presented at ICCF, turns out to be one of the strongest bonds you can have. So it's a C triple bond with a C. And this comes from degrading propane. And so that is all very interesting. So I'm thinking, and I'm seeing this here, and I'm seeing a non-metallic material. I'm thinking carbon. This will all be part of my carbon story, but as you heard me mention, carbon was determined by Nikola Tesla as the only thing that could realistically survive the bombardment of etheric matter particles in his experiments in going to welcome Simeon Hain in here. Simeon Hain, hi. And yeah, so carbon, I think, is where it's at. So that's what I thought when I saw non-metallic material. A material that is different from any known cold fusion metal. The process has the potential to produce fusion at much higher temperatures than present cold fusion experiments. And this again aligned with my thinking in my poster presentation because it's the most stable in the onslaught of lowering the vacuum pressure. And it can withstand these particles. And obviously, carbon is the highest temperature element in the periodic table. It doesn't melt, it sublimes. Anyway, so this means very high efficiencies and large power outputs for small devices. Hydrogenation or deuteration of this material creates a system of electrodynamic plasma energy that takes the shape of a micro miniature sun. It is very hot, but the plasma stays in a small confined space. Heat and electric power can be extracted from the plasma on an as-needed basis to power any device from a small lawnmower or a small water heater all the way to a large system that supplies electric power for many cities. The basis for the theory behind this system has been postulated and published in two articles that introduce the concept of contained fusion called warm fusion or micro-hot fusion. The resulting fusion energy swirls into a spherical ball that creates its own self-holding magnetohydrodynamic effect in a stable shape. This is called fusion-powered ball lightning and could very well be the power of the future. Okay, so this is 1995. In fact, this is actually April 1995. And so they are saying that the fuel self-organizes into a self-contained magnetohydrodynamic stable structure, and they're calling it fusion ball lightning. Utterly, utterly shocking that I should be reading this from April 1995. Yes, that's 30 years ago and some. International interest in the new fusion power is spreading rapidly. Other countries are experimenting with higher temperature cold fusion. Now, when I was reading this, I didn't quite understand the context. It's kind of like and it looked like an elevator pitch, and it becomes clear when you read on. This new power may also be applied to a fusion rocket motor. So he's talking about some sort of propulsion based on this. The United States is lagging, but there are signs that the agencies responsible for new energy research may be considering cold fusion in the plans for future research. So the references down here are Warm Fusion by C. Bennett. So that is one of the authors of this paper, and that was in Cold Fusion, September 1994. Okay, so this would be around the time that they changed the rules in fusion technology to prevent any subjects relating to ball lightning being published. Although they subsequently published in April the US Air Force paper by, what's his name? I'll remember in a minute. The second paper here, an extended micro-hot fusion model for burst activity in deuterated solids by this guy, Kuhn and Sioda, fusion technology. Extraordinary traces produced during pulse discharges in water. So this is actually referring to Takaaki Matsumoto's work. So I'm thinking, why is he writing to Takaaki Matsumoto? And he's also referencing him. Is he just keeping him in the loop? And says previous cold fusion invention by Frolov. Frolov did this kind of like alternative energy papers and so forth. And there's Fusion Facts here. This is the journal that he published in. I think he actually overtook it. And then 321 Cold Fusion Blast Off again by C. Bennett. And then reference 6 here. He's saying that the United States is lagging, but there are signs that the agencies responsible for new energy research may be considering cold fusion in plans for future research. And here he's saying, reference 6, which is change of direction by the Department of Energy by Hal Fox, Fusion Facts. So this is the journal that was run for a short period of time by Hal Fox. Hal Fox was the guy that bought Ken Shoulders' patents. I think he was owning them by this time. This is March 1995. And obviously, he must have been connected, it would seem, to the Department of Energy. At least he knew what was going on there, and he was trying to promote this. So really, he's talking about Russia and Japan and probably Italy here. I don't know, Cioda maybe, or Europe, taking this kind of technology forward. But he's basically claiming they have a working device. Now, it becomes really, really shocking and interesting. And partly not only the fact that he's talking about a device and seemingly suggesting that they can do it, and that it is the resulting fusion energy swirls into a spherical ball that creates its own self-holding magnetohydrodynamic effect in a stable shape. This is called fusion-powered ball lightning. He says, this is Warren Cooley. So Warren Cooley is working with C. Bennett, and April 1995, so over 30 years ago, but it was the distribution list that shocked me, because whether they read it or not, this particular document you see here was sent to the people you're going to see here. President Bill Clinton, Bill Mason, Director of Correspondence for Vice President Al Gore, Senator Jeff Bigerman, Barbara Boxer, Bill Bradley, Bob Dole, Pete Domenici, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, Congressman Robert Matsui, Hazel O'Leary at the Department of Energy, Bruce Tarter, the director of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, Siegfried Hecker, director of Los Alamos National Laboratory, Dr. Edward Stone, director of the Joint Propulsion Laboratory, Daniel S. Goldin, director of NASA, Arthur C. Clarke, Dr. Edmund Storms, Los Alamos National Lab, Dr. George H. Miley, 21st Century, Analog Business Week, Chicago Tribune, Cold Fusion Times, Cold Fusion Update, Discover, Fusion Facts, Infinite Energy, Los Angeles Times, National Space Society, New York Times, Omni Magazine, Sacramento Bee, San Francisco Chronicle, MIT Technology Review, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Dr. Samuel P. Farrell, and Jim Bennett. Um, It's a turnout that I managed to get Dr. Edwin Storms at this conference to admit that his theory, his new theory on how absolutely every LENR works, requires electron clusters. And he gave credit to Mitchell Schwartz, but he said, and others, and I asked him the question, geared to getting him to admit what others were, and he gave credit to Ken Shoulders. And of course, that is who was being spearheaded at this time by Hal Fox. This is shocking to me that people like Al Gore and President Bill Clinton and Bob Dole and all of the directors of the major labs and the head of the fusion technology and Dr. Edmund Storms were made aware of this over 30 years ago. So when I start talking about magnetohydrodynamics and ball lightning and that this can produce various energy types, it must have been ringing some bells for them at the very least. Yes, but that isn't all. It wouldn't be, would it? We have another document here. This was sent on the 2nd of August. So this was distributed. I don't know when it was sent to Matsumoto, but it was distributed to those people in April 1995. 2nd of August. This is an abstract from the patent. And for those that missed it at the start of this call, I said that early on when I started talking about ball lightning, I was visited by the person claiming to be the grandson of Buckminster Fullerene, Buckminster, and I was later that year visited by one. I've forgotten his name now, but I'll go into it. He does the fish thing. Okay, so abstract of the patent application for fullerene fusion electrodynamic generator. Fullerene fusion. Okay, interesting. Can people still see the sharing of the PDF here? And just give me a thumbs up on that. Anyone? Yeah, thank you, Sentient Code. Okay, so this invention relates to the production of electricity and heat energy by means of an electrodynamic fusion plasma utilizing the material Buckminster Fullerene. Co-inventor Warren L. Cooley worked from theoretical basis established by the latter Buckminster Fuller and experimented with the concept that energy can be harvested to do useful work from a shape and that certain shapes are inherently energetic. So what we know is in experiments we have observed spheres with orbs on them or hemispheres on them called Tufts by the Sapphire Project. We've also observed something similar in Vega. So I have this image here, which to me is incredible. I'm trying to go and try to share this and let you think what we are talking about here and how it would work. So I'm going to change to share, stop share that one, and I'm going to go and share this. Okay. So these are this is a frame from a live um, Vega experiment by Henk Uren. So you can see the uh, plasma spheres here, these structures that form on the anode. The cathode is below, and this is the pillow. And looking at one of the samples from Henk Uren, I found these crystal grain boundaries where the material was eaten, just as observed by Takaaki Matsumoto. And the striking thing was is that as it gets eaten more, well, firstly over here there is a triangular hole, which I always like it when I see a triangular hole in something that's meant to be spinning here. So we've got a triangular hole here at the boundary, and in the center of that triangular hole we have a sort of semi-spherical object. Okay, but here we have a structure which is on the crystal grain boundary and it's spherical and it has a shell. And it turns out that this shell is basically made of carbon. Over here, we have one which again is a spherical hole, a spherical structure which is hollow, and then around it, it appears to have domed sections around it, just almost like a miniature analog of this. And so I'm thinking that this is scale invariant, this process. And if you have a working structure and the working structure can be carbon, then you can get these balls of coherent energy forming on that structure, like you see on the anode, but I think is eating away the copper in this particular material here. So I'm going to go back to the paper here, share. We're going to go back to this one. So yeah, when I see this picture at the top here, I'm not entirely sure what I'm looking at, but it looks like, are the deuterons inside like that they suggest, or did they miss a trick and actually a fullerene is a sufficient support to support a regular array of electron clusters on its surface, and that these could then come together, whatever. I'm just putting that out there at the moment. So anyway, an experiment with the concept that energy can be harvested to do useful work from shape, and that certain shapes are inherently energetic. This work resulted in US patent number 4945693, entitled Concentric Dome Energy Generating Building Enclosure. So this is Buckminster Fuller doing architecture, which was one of the things that he's actually famous for, I've learned. Issued on August the 7th, 1990. Further work aimed at establishing a wider utility for geodesic structures resulted in US patent number 5325642, Geodesic Hazardous Waste Containment Building, issued July 7th, 1994. The invention herein demonstrates that shrinking these characteristics and principles to the scale inherent in naturally occurring structures, i.e. carbon fullerenes, results in a catalyst and means of confinement for a fusion reaction. A catalyst and means of confinement for a fusion reaction. Wow. 1995. Accordingly, several objects and advantages flow from the invention. The technology represented in the development of this invention is at the cutting edge of a number of scientific disciplines, including general chemistry, surface chemistry, fluid dynamics, electrodynamics, high-energy physics, quantum physics, and aspects of other related specialty fields. The elements of the invention are combined in a manner that could be described as emulating, to some extent, the natural stellar fusion processes that exist in the universe. A primary element of the invention is, in fact, a naturally occurring phenomenon of the universe, i.e. carbon-60. The invention has implications that are cosmological and may be precursors to new and richer understanding of origins and workings of our universe. Another advantage of the invention is that the raw materials necessary for the production of energy are abundant and inexpensive. They are also converted to energy by means that produces no environmentally harmful side effects. This combination of attributes opens the possibility for the escalation of the world around standards of living that heretofore were unimaginable, the usual sort of fluff that you might see. A specific description of the invention and associated drawings are shown on the reverse side. Okay, what do we have? Descriptions of drawings. Figure 1 is a cross-sectional diagram of essential elements comprising of the apparatus of the invention. A fullerene fusion electrodynamic generator. Figure 2 is a cross-section diagram of a fullerene fusion fuel capsule viewed perpendicular to the magnetic axis running through the concentric center of the fuel cell when positioned for ignition. Figure 3 is a cross-sectional view of a plasmoid, plasmatoroid, showing the axis of the magnetic field and the axis of the electric field with streamlines showing the plasma vortex flow patterns. So here is the overall cell reactor. And we have a south down here and a north up here, which will have a south. So through the center of the fuel cell, you have a magnetic field. And this is very interesting because the PAP cell had a magnetic field running through it, and also the Kiril-Chukhanov pattern on macro quantum coherent nuclear object ball lightning he produced in the microwave reactor. And he would, in his patent, use a changing of that magnetic field to stress the quantum coherent. And what that does actually is it takes the coherent matter out of coherence partially, and that will produce photons and thermal heat. When it's coherent, it's cool, but when you stress it, it will produce heat and photons. So you are able to extract energy from the coherent structure, and that is all in Kiril-Chukhanov's pattern. So that would be one way to do it. But what you're seeing here is more in line with the predating work of Joseph Papp in his PAP engine, where he aligned, in my view, the charge clusters with a magnetic field. Okay. And so he shows the spin direction here, the magnetic spin direction. Of course, in the original plasmoid work by Winston Bostick, he used a magnetic field to get the plasmoids to focus into the center. And of course, in the Lockheed Martin systems and methods for generating coherent matter waves in the 10 micron chambers where they are allowing for the coherence of the matter, they also have a B field, a magnetic field going through the coherent chamber. So this is not a new idea. When this work was sent to Matsumoto and to various dignitaries around the world in 1995, but you can see the consistent story going on in this process. I guess these are charge collectors here or photonic collectors, and so forth. However, I have looked for this patent and I cannot find it. And given all the story around these kind of things, it might be that this was classified. So this might be the only look you get to see at this. Here is the fuel cell. Again, it is showing the spin direction going on. Are these charge collectors or something? I don't know. This is the fuel pellet that starts out. And here is his model of the magnetohydrodynamics going on, which in my view is wrong, but it's not far off. So you've got the spin coming in, the spin coming out, and the flow patterns in there. Not too dissimilar from the basic structure we know and love, but there it is. That's in this diagram. And he says, description of the invention, a fullerene fusion electrodynamic generator designed to produce and a direct conversion of fusion energy to electricity and excess heat energy of sufficient temperature to be useful for the production of steam. The carbon sublimes and converts fusion energy released into a mitigated self-holding toroid of supercharged plasma. The fusion-powered combined cycle cogeneration unit can be scaled to any level, from very small to central power plant producing multiple megawatts of power. The generator will burn a fuel cell 22. This is the fuel cell 22. Where is it? Diagram here. It's the bit in the middle anyway. 22. Yeah, it's only a partial view at the pattern, you see. So at 22, you can see that's the fuel cell here. 22, which is this blown up thing here. will burn a fuel cell 22 comprising of a seed catalyst 4 of carbon 6 deuterated carbon 60 buckyballs, endohedrally deuterated fullerene molecules formed in a donut shape around an air bubble and suspended by a conductive filament and encapsulated by a shell in surrounding solution of lithium deuteride and D2O. So what do you have in this reactor? You have lithium, you have deuterium, you have oxygen, and you have carbon. You have lithium, you have deuterium, you have oxygen, and you have carbon. Okay. The fuel cell 22 is loaded into the plasma burn chamber 64, and this is configured with the axis of a magnetic field 14 perpendicular to the opposing electrodes. So here's the opposing electrodes. So yeah. So I think the little fuel bit is in there. You've got opposing electrodes here, and then you've got the magnetic field coming through the center. Okay. Uh, the opposing electrodes 26 and 27 that are designed to collect fusion generated electrons. The plasma chamber 64 is surrounded by spherical double walls 34 and 38, enclosing a heat exchange conduit. The fuel cell 22 is ignited by a phased resonance of electromagnetic waves and acoustic waves. So phased resonance. So everything that I was talking about in my poster, the fact that you need to have resonant photons, which are electromagnetic waves, or phonons in metal or material or sound is the acoustic waves to produce a toroid plasmoid that spins around the axis of the generator's magnetic field 14. Okay, so there's the magnetic field 14 generator, which is going through the same line as the south and north. The seed catalyst of deuterated fullerene molecules allows fusion plasma to take an electrodynamic shape that holds itself together around a spinning vortex 60. There's the spinning vortex here. That is the vortex coming into this. Okay, this is what I would call the topological monopole in this, in a better version of this plasmoid kind of schematic. This vortex action not only provides a means for pulling fuel into a fusion region, but also eliminates the requirement for large power-consuming magnetic fields of containment as typical of current hot fusion experimental protocol. So yes, it's to Dr. Takamaki Matsumoto, and all of these letters have their original envelopes and stamps and whatever. So they're all totally traceable and authenticated. So I've just because I don't know if this person is still alive or should not. This information should not be in a public domain. I have redacted the bottom here. I would like to find this patent. I have tried to find a patent under the names of the authors as I've suggested, or the companies mentioned, and I have not been able to find it. So it could well have been classified under the classification program for these technologies. But this is pretty well described. Everything that I see in here is logical and should work. It uses the carbon, which I believe is very important to this. It has lithium, it has hydrogen isotopes, it says hydrogen or deuterium, not overly fussed about that. I would like to add aluminium in here, and that would be my ideal fuel mix. It could be that the electrodes here are tungsten, most likely are tungsten, and that would partially be a replacement as a secondary fuel for aluminium, but obviously not so affordable. And so this for me is a working reactor. I think the claims are credible, given what I understand about the process, and pending just a few modifications to diagrams and electrodes and stuff. the description of how it works by phasing and so forth is also accurate. And the use of sound, phase resonance, electromagnetic and acoustic waves all makes logical sense to me. So yeah, that is that, and it just doesn't stop. I think I also have, oh, I've let the cat out of the bag there, so that's that. uh, oh well. Yeah, so all of these people knew that, and I actually have something else as well in this series of documents. So let me see if I can find that. Okay, so this I think is earlier and it's not so refined. Let me just check it's earlier. It might be later. Um, so what I'm looking at is a whole bunch of documents here that are relating to this that were sent to Matsumoto. So in August the 18th, um, 1995, um, I have a document here that is effectively a equipment transfer agreement. It doesn't appear to have been signed by Matsumoto. Um, uh, and I don't know where the scan is of that, so I've got another document which I will look at here. Uh, It says, thank you for your interest in our work. We are very pleased that you wish to review our developments and progress in theory in greater detail. Our legal advisors suggest that because some of the information you have requested is proprietary in nature, we document the transfer of this information as means of protecting rights established in the context of our US patent application. Enclosed, you will find the form Proprietary Materials Loan Agreement. Please read it carefully. It is a standard agreement. The language of the agreement indicates that we are loaning this material. In fact, you are purchasing a copy of the manual and you are not required to return your copy. The material included in the manual is protected under copyright laws of the United States. Please sign the form and return it with your check for $50. Please make your check payable to this guy. You will be mailed a copy of the requested manual promptly. And so, yes, it's basically a how-to. Um, it's just a property materials loan agreement for a how-to document that isn't a how-to document. Okay, so this next document here, uh, okay, Electrodynamic Cold Fusion by Steve Lazarus, Chuck Bennett, and Warren Cooley. So there's this new character, Steve Lazarus. I don't see the mention of Buckminster Fuller in here, but it is based on working with that. Abstract. The inventors describe a hypothetical apparatus that is in the planning and construction stage. The completed apparatus will utilize high-loaded exohedrally deuterated carbon fullerene molecules that have been endohedrally impregnated with two or more atoms of lithium or its isotope. So it's actually got lithium inside the fullerene molecule and delivered to a compression vortex by means of an aerosol jet of inert gas to produce a fusion rate significantly greater than existing background geological fusion rate and therefore readily measurable in the laboratory. So a compression vortex might an aerosol jet of inert gas. This actually sounds like a plasma vortex generator, bearing in mind that this is from 1995. Okay. So this is essentially a discussion of a plasma vortex generator in 1995 and how they deliver the fuel. And it's very interesting because, as I said, Klimov recently said that they were using back in 2001, or rather, they had been using carbon rather than metal as a fuel. along with hydrogen in their reactors, often in the form of water vapor. So hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon in their reactors. And the video showed 2001. Anyway, apparatus. Although the inventors and co-authors are fully vested in the work relating to a number of other theoretical cold fusion models, the idea of using Geissler tube as the basis for a method of exploring cold fusion phenomena and nuclear plasma fusion energy offers some interesting, valuable potential, because at the crux of this investigation, we are working with centripetal de Broglie waves, matter waves. Honestly, matter waves? Matter waves? In 1995, in addition to a number of other radiometric properties, the Geissler tube allows a visible observation of the experimental phenomena. However, the tube requires appropriate modification, and interchangeability is referred to as glow discharge tube in this paper. The glow discharge tube, illustrated in Figure 1, is constructed of high-quality laboratory glass approximately 40 centimeters in length and 4 centimeters in diameter, with a cathode and anode fitted to each of the opposite ends. This is starting to sound familiar. The tube is bisected in the middle and bulges to a radius approximately 1 centimeter greater than the dimension of the lip, 4 centimeters, to the arrangement of glass cones concentric to each other and positioned at the midpoint in the tube. The outer concentric cone is shorter, with the small ends joined to form an hourglass-shaped passage at the mid-neck, positioned midpoint in the tube, and open to the tube at the large end of the cones. The inner concentric cone is longer, with the tapered ends opposite each other and extended slightly beyond the lip of the outer concentric cone, leaving a free passage in the center between the inner and outer cone arrangements. The configuration is designed so that the midpoint bisects the length of the tube and the concentric center aligns with the opposing electrodes. Opposing electrodes. So you have opposing electrodes in a tube. This really sounds familiar, and I want someone to try and guess what I'm referring to as to what it sounds familiar to. The tube is constructed with a vacuum port 7 near the cathode 9 and an aerosol port 11 located in the bulged portion of the tube. On the anode side, 31 of the midpoint between the large ends of the inner and outer concentric cones. The aerosol port is used to introduce fusible isotopes 15 into the tube. The port near the cathode is connected to a vacuum pump 13 and functions to balance the negative gauge pressure required to operate the system. The objective of this arrangement is to introduce fusible material and gas into a closed vessel and maintain a balance of negative gauge pressure. Additionally, the vacuum port can be fitted with devices for measuring and filtering byproducts produced in the reaction. At the midpoint of the tube, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so it actually tells you where to get the tube from, and the electrodes are connected to a Tesla-type coil that has the capacity to radiate energy at high frequency and voltage through space. So they're using basically a Tesla coil to get this to work. The de Broglie harmonic resonance frequency of the particles and nuclides is 10 to the power 24 a second. This is beyond the working frequencies that can be produced with the apparatus, but to manipulate the energy states, beats of lower frequencies can be applied as spherical luminous wave interferences to emphasize the centripetal wave aspect of the matter, thereby producing a couple between particle behavior and focal wave. To accomplish this in the context of the apparatus, the discharge from the cathode is pulsed, causing it to twist or spiral as it moves through the magnetic field located at the bisection of the tube. So there's a magnetic field across the tube, and there is a high frequency as best they can, forcing this to spiral. An alternate scenario utilizes a pulsed or twisted discharge cathode by means of the integration of a magnetron device into the circuit. This enables the focal waves to become coherent with a central vortex created by electrons moving through the inner cone configuration. Under special circumstances, energy can swirl into the spherical ball and create its own self-holding electromagnetic self-holding electrodynamics while maintaining a stable shape, as in ball lightning in nature. At the central vortex, the energy ball, a term herein called the green energy ball, stabilizes into a spherical shape and becomes a dynamo that sets up the action of energy transfer. The phenomenon of the energy vortices operates both globally and locally within the tube. Huh. Fusion fuel. Experimental investigations into the chemical potential of carbon fullerene are taking place in many laboratories worldwide. To date, the most beautiful molecule has been chemically manipulated in hundreds of ways that include encapsulation of atomic elements inside the carbon cage, as well as the attachment to the outside of the cage. We are elevating the progress in fullerene to a postulate that the most ideal fusion fuel for the apparatus and method described herein can be made by the endohedral loading of carbon-60 with 2 or more atoms of lithium or its isotopes, and the exohedral loading of carbon-60 with hydrogen or deuterons to create 2 lithium plus carbon-60 plus deuteron with N greater than 30. So plenty of deuterons on the carbon-60 with lithium in the center, hereafter referred to as fullerene fusion fuel. Maximum power is achieved by separating FFF molecules from each other upon injection into the device. This is accomplished by using an aerosol mixture of FFF molecules with a propellant of helium or neon gas. Operation. You can see it there. I'm not going to go into all of the details here. This is wavelength dimension, the domain of the atomic interaction, anticipating the experiment, quantum uncertainty principle, blah, 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 blah. This ensures individual fusion probability of nearly 100% and collectively in excess of 200,000 fusions per second. Okay, so experiments and clues from Jupiter. We recently ran an experiment at eQuest in Palo Alto, California, with the help of Russ George. You beeping what? You beeping what? So, can I just clarify here? As I said at the beginning, when I started talking about ball lightning, 2 people turned up on my doorstep in a short period of time. One was the grandson, I think that's what he referred to himself, of Buckminster Fuller. And then later in 2017, Russ George turned up on my doorstep, wanting to know what's what. Not suspicious at all. And I can't find this patent anywhere that all this work is referring to. And it's about magnetohydrodynamics producing self-stabilizing fusion device, which is producing a ball lightning structure. Let's go back to the writings. With the help of Russ George, deuterated fullerene was placed in a plasma glow discharge tube. In this apparatus, the deuterated fullerene was injected into an evacuated glass tube with electrodes at both ends. Really does sound familiar. Does anyone remember anything that sounds a little bit like this? Then high voltage was applied to create an arc across the length of the tube. This approach is similar to the effect in a neon light, except that much higher energy may be released when cold fusion reaction takes place, resulting in a mild transmutation. In the experiment at eQuest, there was no reaction at first. Then a few minutes later, while discussions were taking place away from the apparatus, a strong reaction did occur that had enough power released to break the seal of the glow discharge tube. Further experiments will be required to learn the nature of the anomaly observed. Current thinking in cold fusion circles is converging on the view that a wide spectrum of diverse transmutations of milder nature may be at the root of all cold fusion reactions. Transmutations may involve a simple reaction where a light alkaline metal or host metal, as well as other atoms of electrolytic salt, may accept a proton or neutron, thus creating a mild but undetectable fusion that releases a large amount of energy. This is vastly different from conventionally assumed DD fusion, although DD fusion is not ruled out as part of the transmutation spectrum. This view of cold fusion reactions would explain why there is very little registration of byproducts using standard methods. This is new views, blah, blah, blah. I think it's actually referring here to Matsumoto's work. Clue from Jupiter is more direct. In proposing an actual mechanism behind cold fusion reactions, we can recall dramatic event fusion forecast, blah, blah, blah. That's not really so relevant. Okay. Okay, it's talking about the Shoemaker levy impact. This element A becomes a slight offset isotope of the original non-isotopic element. Nevertheless, the result of the impact is still fusion that releases a sizable amount of energy. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, conclusion. In this proposed experiment, the electrons and rarefied gas swirl into a spherical ball of electrodynamic energy that has a stable shape. The implosion of fusion fuel takes place primarily at the continuum between the spherical surfaces of the central and secondary vortices in a very short time frame and holds the potential for producing transmuted bioproducts as well as light energy. It is anticipated that the atomic fusion rate will be significantly greater than background and therefore easily measured. The inventors anticipate that the generation of excess energy from the apparatus will be most effective in the form of light energy, and that a coherent medium and reflective cowling could be added to produce a laser. Well, Klimov produced a laser without any of those things. It just self-mazed or self-lased in using carbon in a plasma vortex reactor in 2001 or earlier. So we have Bennett. Matsumoto is reference 3. Bennett is reference 4. Feynman, 7. David Moon, 8. Stephen E. Jones, 9. Ed Storms, 10. Poincare, Bernhardt. And here is the diagram. So we have a magnetic field across the center here. We have electrodes producing our discharge. And that is essentially it for this particular device. So this looks a little bit less good than the pattern-based device that we see shown here. So this is an exploration of the idea, and this is what they believe works embodiment. So there is some more materials on this. Essentially, that is the story. A transfer agreement with the original letter, the abstract from the patents of the original envelope, the new transmutation of cold fusion with the original envelope, the power on small suns, this document I've just read you. So that's what I wanted to share, really, that very senior people in the US and in major agencies and even president and vice president would have been made aware of this in 1995. Does anyone have any comments? Is anyone there? Anyone want to put their hand up to speak? So, Mika Avila says, no surprise. Ha ha ha. Nikita Vivox says, came in late. Do you have a link to the paper? No, no. There is no paper anywhere. These were private communications that I found after I gave my presentation in Japan. And the first one that I read that I showed, which was this one, where it just is basically a briefing document to government people. Not this one. Is it this one? Yeah, this briefing document where basically it says power from small suns produces a spherical ball that creates its own self-holding magnetohydrodynamic effect called fusion-powered ball lightning. And that's just it's just like a kick in the teeth, really, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, Gordon who says, Bob, many thanks for this lifting of the lid on what was happening back then. Yeah, I'm kind of getting a full picture now of why people go skips when you mention exotic vacuum objects and ball lightning. I understand why they wanted to write Matsumoto out of the picture. I understand why they were very keen to, within 2 days of me massively bringing attention to Ken Shoulder's work in 2017, that they would choose to wipe the record of his website. Yeah, the schematics are familiar. Yes, they are familiar. Very familiar. You can ask questions in the chat if you can't call, or do audio. So I will publish these um, documents um, in a blog, maybe attached to the other blog. I mean, honestly, when I read the first one and saw the list of prominent people, including George Miley and Edmund Storms and Bill Clinton and Bob Dole and director of correspondence for Al Gore and NASA and JPL and Lanel and Lawrence Livermore and Department of Energy, I was just so angry because it took me a few seconds to read this thing, and it's got the references there to Matsumoto's work and Ken Shoulders. I mean, you literally have Matsumoto and Ken Shoulders' work in this briefing document in 1995, and those are the people I never heard about until I found out for myself. Disgusting, absolutely disgusting. 30 years ago. Yeah, Gordon, an inconvenient truth. So sick. Yeah. Um, I mean, yeah, the model of the ball lining's not quite accurate, and I think we can do better with the fuel. I kind of like the idea of the fuel, but when I look back on it now, that I went full spectrum on this in 2017. It was in March 2017 with Red Pill. And I said, Ken Shoulders and ball lightning, that's it. This is the process. This is the process. And someone knows it. And then the guy, Buckminster Fuller's grandson turns up, and then Russ George. And literally, to get this technology, they worked with Buckminster Fuller himself, and Russ George did the initial testing, which showed that something was going on. Yeah. So I'd be very keen to see if someone can find a printer. Like I say, I've fullerene fusion electrodynamic generator. Let's just actually have a look for that. I actually haven't searched for those words, and maybe that's going to be a thing. Maybe I can actually get that as words I can use. Fullerene fusion electrodynamic generator. Let's see if that actually does anything. Um, la di da. No. Oh, nano fusion reaction. Google patterns. Ooh, hold on a minute. Inventor Robert Hotto, filed by individual. A nanofusion reactor combines the nano. Hmm. No, it's not the same thing. No, it's not the same thing. Yeah, so see if you can find the patent. Perfect geometry, I think. Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, I think they've got orders. Um, Nikita Vivok is asking why they've got fullerene. Fullerene can capture a lot of deuterons on the outside and have lithium inside. I don't know whether it's so much that as whether it's the structure. And I referred to this sequence of images that you might have missed because you came in late or after we'd started. So this is images from um, the. Uh, can you see that? Can you see that while I'm showing? Yeah, okay. So here we have the tufts, as they call them in the Sapphire project, uh, balls of fire, as they were called in 2001 in a Japanese paper. Or it was I think it was a Hungarian paper published in a Japanese journal, but whatever. Um, and this is on the anode in a Henkya and Vega experiment. The cathode here in the crystal green boundaries, just as observed by Matsumoto, you've got spherical areas being eaten away, but not just spherical areas. Like we've seen in other systems, you literally have a triangular hole which has a more spherical object in the center. But when we look at these under SEM, these structures, whilst this is copper and this is so forth, this is actually carbon spheres. And here's another carbon sphere here. And on this carbon sphere, which is hollow, it has these domed sections around the outside. So I'm suggesting that it starts off as a single sphere, but then it starts transmuting and producing a lot of carbon. And then around the outside, you end up with a self-similar structure like this. And that produces these hemispheres, and the hemispheres are eating away at the metal. And so um, I think it's just a good framework for the process, but I don't think you need to do that. Yeah, it's a perfect hexagonal arrangement. The electrons on the Buckminster fullerene will be shared amongst all those atoms. It's the highest temperature material, so I think it's just a really good starting point. Was the fullerene ejected or was it allowed to develop during the discharge using the carbon electrodes? There's no carbon electrodes. It doesn't say what the electrodes are. I suspect they were tungsten. So there's a north-south magnetic field between the two, and the carbon fuel was in there, and it set up the production of. It's like an initial fuel that gets hit with a discharge, and then it's resonantly stimulated. So it's basically triggered to produce nanoparticles of lithium, deuterium, and carbon in the fuel mixture. And the triggering produces the initial magnetohydrodynamics, and then it is resonantly driven by resonant sound and resonant electromagnetic waves, both of the things that I was describing in my post presentation as the ways that you spin these things up. And when you spin it up at the core, you will just, in my view, build up the magnetic strength until you get even better than fusion. You get color disconfinement of quarks, and you end up with something that's even better than fusion. You get baryon decay. Anyway, it would look the same on the outside, and you would probably get some fusion going on as well, or what looked like fusion. It would just be collapse of the matter waves. And based on the density of the collapse of the matter waves, you'd get some helium coming out, but it wasn't actually fusion. It was just a higher density of matter waves. Yummy matter crumble. Okay, is no one able to comment like in person? If not, I will go to bed because it's midnight here. And thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you, Bob. I'm, I'm blown away. I'm gonna have to.
I can honestly say I was angry. I'd only, it was like, I've done my presentation. I walked downstairs and I said to the guys, I said, and I copied the scans that I'd done of that paper. I had them actually as pictures on my phone, and I just read them out to the people. And I said, I'm as angry as hell. This went out to all of these people in April 1995. And two of the people listed as references had all of their material moved. And now I understand why Matsumoto was so fearful and the reason he kind of basically disappeared. And he said he was threatened. I believe he was threatened. And I think it was the same cabal of people that prevented his work from being published, and also that blackballed Ken Shoulders. And also, when I mentioned Ken Shoulders in 2017, within 2 days took his website down. I think this is the way it works, and I can't give any other explanation. I mean, I basically had only three people visit me here, and two of them came within short duration of me talking about Ball Lightning and Ken Shoulders in 2017. And one was this Fullerene grandson or relative. I don't know. That's what he said. Like, he might not have been. I didn't check any credentials. I just sat down with him and had a beer, and he told me, said who he was. And then the other guy was Russ George, who really was Russ George, and was the person that did the initial testing in the development of this technology. The last time I met Russ George, I met him having gone to the toilet in Miami last year, and I came out, was at the toilet, and there he was, and he'd just been speaking with Peter Thiel, and he's right into that nexus. So go figure. Mika Vila says Thiel is always in the salad.
While you were talking, I thought of course, a lot of the references you made and papers you've shared and put some of them in the chat. The Bagel Game, Force
Hmm.
Retime Harmonic Plasmoids.
Hmm.
And then there's some more recent stuff on fullerene things I found. Um, but my question was, well, it's not so much a question. Obviously, there's giant conflicts, it being controlled by uh, the powers that be, so to speak, or something. So
Ken
if
says,
they are the
was
ones who
Joan, hold on, Ken's got a question. Was Jones part of the carbon fusion group? No, he was just referenced in one of the papers. So carry on.
yeah, well, if they're the ones developing it and they had eventually release something that benefits the public, that's a partial win, I guess, but it still hurts, I guess. Yeah. There was a question. I'll think of one if you have more time in a moment.
Okay. Yeah, so how I feel about it is the rate of pace of their improvement from the initial tests with Russ George to a patent, which really everything I see in that patent looks pretty plausible, uh, is supported by my own intuition, my own observations, Tesla's observations, so many things. Because I like carbon story is the last part of my stories that I want to deliver in terms of the materials that I want in a reactor with the justified reasons that I'm developing in terms of just telling people what I think works. And then this comes along and it's got everything in there, bar the aluminium, in not too far away from the configuration I would argue would work. And
Is that 95 as well, the patent?
yeah, the application is 1995. Yeah, it's freaking 30 years ago this October. But I don't. I've tried to search for it. I like spent quite a bit of time trying to search on and the names of the two companies, the names of all of the authors, the name of the ideas, and I can only conclude, given the fact that the two people on that briefing document to all those senior lab heads and journal editors and presidents and vice presidents and senators and so forth, that they realized this really was a thing and shut down those people that were relevant.
Same old story, unfortunately, in that respect.
It is the same old story, but this is, in my view, absolutely the answer.
It's the most egregious of them, perhaps, of the stories.
Well, just think of, I've come to the conclusion now that the agreement was made in the 1950s that they were onto something. They really understood potentially there was a way to produce unlimited energy. And they just went to the Arabs and said, look, you have a choice. We're going to produce this energy and you're never going to be able to sell another drop of oil, or you sell oil and we'll keep it in the back burner and you make sure you sell it in dollars. And it's not a protecting them with bombs and stuff. It's protecting in terms of a protection racket. You do as we say and you make us all rich and we will not release this technology. Now, of course, this is in 1995, so, this is a lot further down the line. But what it might have happened is that they worked this out in the black world, and this was effectively them working out in the white world, and they shut that down as well. So this is part of the protection racket. If we cannot find the patent behind this and behind this document, where is it? I mean, there's another letter here where he gets really angry, the actual author of his work, and he says Motorola, they sent 6 letters or 5 letters to Motorola explaining that they have a working fusion device. So like, and Motorola, like they made the first mobile phone, didn't they? Or whatever.
And this goes back to the flubbing of Fleischmann and Pons's results and everything. All the other stories, Tesla's disparagement and wrecking, basically, just over and
Anyway,
over.
it's not acceptable, and the cat
No.
is out. The cat is out of the bag. We just need some people that are going to actually put the effort in. I'll do what I can. Um, I think we have the skills within the team. Um, I mean, like I say, it's like I've been working as hard as I can to roll out the exact reasons why each element I am choosing, and carbon was the next on the list, and I've had to delay this several times, and now I find this. I mean, you look at my paper, the C3C bond, that's the strongest one there is. You can't go any stronger than that. And that is what is in Klimov's reactor, producing a freestanding without any mirrors lasing. And it's a kind of CC lasing. And that's what they're talking about in here, but they're saying, oh, you would want to put mirrors in there. No, no, it doesn't. It's a carbon laser without having any pump waves. It's self-organizing, producing coherent light. So, yeah. All right, well, I'm going to call it a night. Thank you guys for dipping in. I will see if I can publish this because I think it needs to get to a bigger audience. Um, yeah, we're in a funny time now where the answer is right within our grasps, and I really, really, really mean it. Yes, this paper, in my view, doesn't have the understanding, but you didn't need to have the understanding there to see a working device and to know the basic principles behind it. Um, yeah. As Mika Avila says, this is bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. Joseph Collar, it would be great for you to join us in Prague, where we will show you how to specifically transmute matter in a test in front of your very eyes. It would be great to see you again or see you. All right, so guys, I'm going to say goodnight. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. Sentient code. See you guys. Bye.